Welcome to Third Floor Views, a production of Chesapeake Family Life, where we talk about health, education, and living with kids. I'm your host, Janet Jefferson. Today, we're talking about the new Women's Museum, and we're also going to talk about running a women-owned business during the pandemic and how those two things are related. Joining us is Jane Abram, and she actually chaired a bipartisan congressional commission to study the potential of a National Women's History Museum, and was recently named to the Advisory Council of the Smithsonian's newest endeavor, the American Women's History Museum. And then jumping in, we'll also have Betsy Abraham, and she is right here, and she is the co-owner of Scout and Molly's Boutique in Annapolis Town Center. And Jane is the other co-owner, and they're going to talk a little bit about starting a business during a pandemic. So to our viewers, please feel free to submit any questions you might have in the comment section, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. Let's jump right in. First, I want to say thank you. Thank you, Betsy and Jane, for joining me today.
Thank you for having us here. We're pleased to be with you.
Let's start off with the big news that I feel like a lot of people maybe haven't heard yet is about the National Women's Museum. And that is going to be the newest Smithsonian museum that we will have. And I'd like to talk just a little bit, Jane, how you got involved with the Bipartisan Congressional Commission to study the potential of the National Women's Museum and what your experience was like.
Well, it was a wonderful experience. As some of you may know, it's been a number of years that folks have been talking about the need to have a women's museum that's part of the Smithsonian. And for a variety of reasons, it seems like all of these sorts of endeavors take time, and there's politics that's included in it. And one of the steps that has always been important to getting a museum at the national level is a commission to study the feasibility. And so back in 2014, Congress passed legislation authorizing both parties, the House and the Senate, to appoint members to a commission to study this. So 8 of us were appointed. I was elected chairman of that. And so we were given 18 months to study what I think most people would say is a no-brainer. Should there be a women's history museum at the Smithsonian? And the answer is yes. But it took us quite a bit of time to sift through all the different aspects of that. What types of exhibits would be included, where it would be located, how you make sure that it's inclusive of all political viewpoints and make sure it's diverse. So we took 18 months to do that work. And as chairman, I established right at the beginning that our recommendation was going to be unanimous. So any of the issues that we might have as commissioners, we sifted through all of that over the 18 months. And then in 2016, it was at the end of the year, we unanimously recommended to Congress and to the administration that there should be a National Women's History Museum, and that we felt the right place for that was at the Smithsonian. But we acknowledged, this takes time. If you remember how long it took for the African American Museum and Cultural Center to be stood up, you realize that this doesn't happen just overnight. And so we recommended that the first thing that the Smithsonian should do was put in place an initiative right inside existing museums to begin to identify the stories that haven't been told about women and the role that they've played in history, and also begin to hire curators and build that infrastructure. And the Smithsonian took that recommendation and immediately began to implement that initiative. So for the last couple of years, there's been a very strong initiative that's begun to pull a lot of this together. And now that Congress has authorized the building of an actual museum, we go to the next stage, which is the advisory council being appointed. And I'm very proud to have been asked to join that council.
So, with the initiative to have that internal work being done at museums, looking at what's already there in terms of women's
Mhm.
history, is that something that the public will see or can see? Are there special exhibits or things that are being pulled out a little bit more consciously than maybe they were being done before?
Well, there have been. Yeah, that's one of the things that the initiative really has spearheaded. And so at several of the museums, there have been exhibits that have begun to highlight several of the artifacts. And, it's interesting because the Smithsonian has thousands and thousands and thousands of artifacts, but sometimes the interpretation of those artifacts um, is different than it might be if you're looking at it through the lens of women's history.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that the Smithsonian's been working hard to do is take a look at all the inventory that they have and identify what we already have and how it might be able to be described from the viewpoint of the role that women played in history. And so a lot of that work is being done. And at the same time, the Smithsonian is certainly looking for other artifacts and other stories. I'm oftentimes asked, are there stories about, women that we should know that this museum will bring to light? And there's a fun little story that I always tell, because every little girl and boy, when they learn about the American Revolution, learn about Paul Revere and how brave he was as a young boy, getting on that horse, riding in the middle of the night to announce that the British were coming. But what our children have never learned is that there is a little girl by the name of Sybil Luddington who did exactly the same thing. She actually was a little bit younger than Paul Revere, and she wrote a little bit further than Paul Revere, and she announced the very same message.
Huh.
And so the point of that story is that at every stage of our history, women have played a part, and we just don't know that. And so I do think that there will be a lot of stories like that will come to light as the Smithsonian works through this.
That's really exciting. I think, particularly as a woman myself, but then also being a mother of two daughters, trying to, and you as well, trying to raise strong women. It's really exciting to hear that a lot of these hidden stories might become more public and great for children to see, and young women and boys to see growing up and have those as role models.
Absolutely.
As you were talking a little bit about the work that you were doing before. I'd love to hear a little bit about the timeline, and sort of, you were saying that you had 18 months to study sort of the viability and whether it was a good idea or not to have this museum. And I don't even know if 18 months is a lot of time or if it's a tiny amount of time. Like, where does this fall in the timeline too? Because I know that was the initial step, and now you're moving further down the line. How does this compare to other museums? And when do you think we might actually have a museum that we could walk in through the doors and enjoy?
Well, that will, of course, will be determined by the Smithsonian, and the advisory council that I'm part of will play a role in recommending on all recommendations on all sorts of issues. But to answer your question about the 18 months, for the 8 of us, it seemed like not enough time, and it seemed like an eternity at the same time. Because there were so many things that we needed to sift through. And we were a very diverse group of women. We were 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. We were from different parts of the country, different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different professional work backgrounds. And we had different viewpoints on a lot of things. And so all of that took time for us to be able to listen to each other and focus on what our common goals were, and then figure out how we reach those goals. And we oftentimes would joke that if perhaps they put the 8 of us in charge of the government, things would go a little bit smoother, because we actually, I think, represent the diversity that is in our political arena these days. And we found a way to work together. We found a way to listen to each other. We found a way to put our differences aside and figure out where we had common goals, and so forth. So 18 months did fly by. We were proud to be able to make our recommendations. And then it's taken now, since that time, 3 years to be able to get the legislation passed through Congress. And so it was passed in Congress the end of last year. And that established the museum. And now the Smithsonian thinks it'll probably be a 10-year process. They first have to study, possible locations to build it. And they've been given a period of time to be able to do that. That has to go back to Congress because they have the oversight, of course. And in the meantime, they're beginning to put some of the other pieces together of the museum. So I would say a physical museum, probably 10 years. But in the meantime, there are exhibits already as part of this initiative. So the museum exists already. It exists within the Smithsonian already. And it's going to exist online because now, there's so much in the digital world. So people can access all sorts of exhibits and stories already through the Smithsonian. And then they can see those physical exhibits inside the American History Museum, inside the Portrait Museum, inside Air and Space, inside a lot of the other museums. And then eventually, I'd say maybe 10 years or so, there will be an actual physical museum where some of this will reside. It doesn't mean that it won't reside in the other museums too. It will. But this will be a place where additional stories about the role women have played in our rich history can be shown. It really completes the history. That's the way we look at it, the complete history of America at that point, when you can see some of the roles women have played.
Absolutely. We make up a half. So that's a really important
even more than a half, right? A little more than a half, right?
Exactly. So you've talked a little bit about the commission and how there were 8 of you, and you voiced the importance of coming with a unanimous decision, and that even though you were really diverse, you were able to work really well together. Do you see a lot of that carrying through now to the advisory council? Because I know it's a much larger group. Is that diversity also seen on the council? And then how are you going to do some of your decision making? Or is that even something that you figured out yet?
Well, that will be, well, first of all, the council's very diverse. It's made up of 25 people, and the legislation established that some of those spots went to members of Congress. The House and the Senate each were tasked with appointing 2 members, one from each party. And then the Secretary of the Smithsonian, who's Lonnie Bunch, is a member. And then the Board of Regents also appointed a member. And then beyond that, the other 19 were appointed. And it's a very diverse group. I'm so proud to be part of this group. People like Tory Burch, like Linda Carter, just Billie Jean King.
Amazing.
There's just a wonderful group of people who have worked in the area of diversity, people who've worked in the corporate world. It's good. It's a very diverse group, and I think we all will bring different life experiences to the table. And again, our role is to advise the Board of Regents on all sorts of issues, and I think that we will all take that role very seriously, and I have every reason to believe that we will all work very well together. The Smithsonian does museums right, and so especially under Lonnie Bunch's leadership, he really stood up the African American Museum and Cultural Center. He was head of that project and head of that museum for a long time. So now that he is Secretary of the Smithsonian, I think we're in very good hands.
Well, it's really exciting and something to look forward to and continue to learn more about as it unfolds. I want to shift just a little bit and talk about your role as a co-owner of a boutique and being a woman who is also a business owner.
Yep.
and starting during a pandemic,
I
which
know it. So
I can't
let me,
wait to hear the story.
well, let me turn around so you can see a little bit of the boutique here. So my daughter Betsy and I are the co-owners, and we owned a couple of stores in the Northern Virginia area and have for a few years. COVID hit us hard like it did everybody. And so we ended up closing for a short period of time, both of those stores. And one of them really, it was the right decision to keep it closed and not to open it back up. And right about the time we were making that decision, it became clear that this location in Annapolis Town Center was available. And that was in November of last year. And so Betsy and I decided to do a little pop-up store here for 2 months. And I'll tell you, the reaction from the Annapolis community was absolutely fabulous. With Nordstrom closing and some of the other stores closing, there wasn't, a huge variety. And what we offer in our boutique is a little bit something special for everyone. We hope that people feel like they're shopping in their best friend's closet when they come in the store. Betsy and I do the buying together. And of course, we're two different generations. So that helps when we look at bringing in our product. We try to bring in things that would appeal to a grandmother, appeal to a mother, appeal to a daughter. My greatest joy is when all three come in together to shop, and every single one, a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter, all leave with a special outfit that they couldn't have found someplace else, but found it here together shopping. And so that's what we're all about. It was a little bit of a leap of faith to open during the pandemic, but the Annapolis Town Center made that decision very easy because they were great to work with, gave us the ability to be here for 2 months to do a little bit of testing. And then when the response was so positive, they were willing to extend my lease for several months. And so we've been here the whole year. And now we're talking about extending that lease for a few more years. We're here to stay. We love it here, and everybody's been great to work with.
Well, that's really exciting. And I'm glad to hear that it went so well, because I can see it, going both ways, because it is a moment of so many unknowns and so many variables, which I think makes it really hard to make some decisions sometimes. Could you talk about maybe some of your biggest challenges that you've had since opening, and whether that was related to the pandemic or related to sort of indirectly, the economic cycles going up and down, or even just your experience, being in the community and opening up a small boutique? What have been maybe some of those biggest struggles?
Well, I think one of the biggest is it's hard to project. It's hard to project buying, so like so many stores, when COVID hit, that spring, we had just taken in our whole spring inventory, and all of a sudden we had to close down. And so we then got stuck with a lot of inventory. And so that was tough. And I think a lot of stores went under because they couldn't handle keeping all of that inventory and not having the sales to move it. At the same time, we had no idea how long it was going to last. And at the same time, our vendors had no idea. They got stuck with a lot of inventory. So the next phase we went through is that a lot of the vendors didn't produce very much stuff because they had gotten burned at the beginning of COVID. So they didn't want to get stuck with a lot of that inventory. So once things started to open up, a challenge was that it was hard to find inventory. And one of the things that has happened recently, as weddings that have been postponed have now been held, and different events are starting to go off. People are having a hard time finding dresses because there is not that inventory. And one of the things that we do offer here is some special pieces. And so when you come here, you're not going to find 5 of the same dress in 5 different sizes and in 3 different colors. Instead, you're going to find a special size 12 in this style and a special size 2 in that style and another 6 in that style. And I'll tell you, we've had a lot of people have great success at coming in as mothers of the bride or mothers of the groom and finding just the perfect dress or the perfect jumpsuit. And this is after they tell me that they've gone, there's my better half, my daughter, Betsy, after they've gone, to different malls to check, or they've ordered things online and have had to return things. So I'm pleased that people are able to find some special things like that in our store.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting to think about the inventory side of things because, that's being reflected virtually as well. Online shopping, there's struggle to find things there too. And something else I didn't think about is the seasonality of the fashion industry. So was that one of the things that you struggled here? You had this huge, maybe spring inventory that you were you're sitting on, right? And then you open back up and you're like, oh no.
So how do we deal with that, Betsy?
It's a struggle there, but a lot of stuff can be kind of transitional and it's how you style it. And, we sat on things for a while, but the seasons then come back around. So,
so the way we do buying, so actually right now we're buying for spring of next year.
You do it so far.
Oh my gosh.
You have to do it in advance. And that's a challenge with COVID because you just don't know how much to buy. Are we going to continue to see some, positive movement where people aren't wearing masks, or are some of these variants
going to be canceled again?
Right.
Is it,
So some of those unknowns, we have to juggle a little bit.
I can imagine even too, are people working from home because of COVID? So maybe want more comfortable clothes versus are people now going back into the office and miss wearing more formal business wear and are looking for something a little bit more traditional? Or like you were just saying before with the weddings, now we're having this wedding boom, or at least on the edge of this wedding boom, and everybody needs a dress and can't find a dress.
Well, here's an interesting thing. Get a couple of the crinkle joggers.
Oh, yeah.
So you are absolutely right on point there, because with people doing all their work from home and doing Zoom calls and so forth, people wanted comfort. A lot of people wore pajamas all day, or jogging suits. So actually, when we first opened up, our most popular item was a lounge set. And we ended up bringing in a couple of different styles. They were so popular, we ended up bringing 20 different styles in. Oh, and that was really what we focused on. Well, then as people began to get out and about and start working a little bit, some of us put a few pounds on during COVID. So they still were interested in comfort. And get for me the navy blue camo. And so here is something that was designed. It's called the crinkle jogger. So no one had ever heard of a crinkle jogger before all of this, but now it's the most popular thing in our store. And so it looks like pants, feels like sweatpants, a jogger. It ties at the top. It's very loose. It can roll up to be cropped. And so people are buying them right and left to travel in, to play in, to work in. They wash well. And that would have never happened, I don't think, without the COVID period, and the nice thing is they're wrinkled. So you don't have to worry about ironing them or what, because that's the style. It's a sort of a crinkle look. So that, I think, will be here to stay. But if you're someone like me who's a buyer and you're thinking about now, I'm placing my spring buy, I'm not going to place orders for as many for next spring as I brought in for this spring, because I think by the time we get through the fall and the winter, people presumably are going to be back in their offices a little bit more and back maybe the 10 pounds off that they had put on and are going to want to have a little bit more business oriented.
Mhm.
So it's trying to predict some of that
That's so hard.
is a little bit of a challenge, but that's also part of the fun, you know, and it gives Betsy and me stuff to stay up late talking about.
I can only imagine. What advice might you have to other women who are looking to start a business now?
Starting a business is not for the faint-hearted, I guess I would say. Some of it is that you just have to have faith in yourself. You have to have a good business plan for sure, and you have to have enough resources so if something doesn't go just the way you wanted it to, it isn't going to bring you down financially. And you know, it takes more work than you might think. Because when you own a business, you don't have an IT department, you don't have a marketing department, you don't have an accounting department, you're everything until you get everything going. And so you just realize that you're everything. It's almost how I felt when, because I have twins, Betsy's a twin. And when I brought the twin girls home, that first night I was up all night long. And I remember in the rocking chair, I had one of them in my arms and I looked down and I said, okay, this is forever and I'm in charge. So it's kind of that feeling, you know, when you own your own business there, I mean, it's fallen on your shoulders. So if a bill doesn't get paid, it's, you know, so I do wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and think, oh my gosh, I forgot to send that out. So I would just say, realize it is a lot of work, but it's worth doing. And I wish there were more that would jump into it. And I'd be happy to chat with anyone that might be interested in getting into business, whether it's a retail store or something else. You know, I think it's important for women to stick together and form a network of support. And I try to do that. So if anybody wants to reach out to me with any questions, I'm certainly happy to talk to them about it.
Well, thank you. How do you think maybe your perspective as a business owner will impact your ideas or thoughts in terms of the vision or your work in any way with the Women's Museum?
Well, I think I bring, I'll bring my whole background to the table. You know, I mean, certainly the struggle of being a small business owner, that's a perspective that a lot of women have had in our history, and that's something that needs to be showcased. You know, certainly I'm a mother, you know, I bring that perspective. I have, you know, a little bit of political background. Certainly I was appointed by one political party to the commission. So I bring that background. I grew up in the Midwest. My dad was a auto worker for a number of years. So I have a very Midwestern outlook on life. So I'll bring all of those to the table and more. And then I think everybody that's part of the council will do the same. And so I think I'm excited. We're having our first virtual meeting next week. So it'll be the first time that our advisory council has been able to see each other, even though it'll be on Zoom. And so we're looking forward to that.
Well, that's very exciting. And it's great to hear that you're getting ready and meeting already. So we know that this museum is in good hands and well underway. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much to you, Jane, and then also to Betsy in the background who's doing
I know
two things
she's
at
helping
once.
one of our customers. Yes. And let me just say, you know, every time I talk about the museum, I have people that message me on Facebook or drop me emails that say, okay, well, is there going to be a way for us all to help? You know, absolutely. You know, whether it's that you want to volunteer down the road, certainly a lot of money will need to be raised to build the museum. You know, the government will provide a certain seed money, and then that needs to always be matched by private sector. And so there will be lots of opportunities for people to be part of this museum in a lot of different ways. And one of the most significant ones is actually going and seeing the exhibits and participating in what the initiative's doing. So please, go online to the Smithsonian website and look at the Her Story, HERSTORY segment, and that will, you can sign up there and then get alerts about things that are happening. And we'd love to have everybody involved.
Perfect, Jane. That was great. And we'll put those links up on our website with this video as well. So that will be easy to access for everyone.
I'll be sure you get the right link.
Perfect. Well, thank you again to Jane and Betsy. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. Thank you, Betsy, for playing doing two roles at once. Make sure that you do visit ChesapeakeFamily.com for up-to-date information on home health and living for today's Maryland parent. And as I said, those links will be posted as well with this video. This episode will be archived on ChesapeakeFamily.com in both video and podcast format. I'm Janet Jefferson with Chesapeake Family Life. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.